The smell of antiseptic filled the air. White walls, white beds, and white coats, all too bright for the kind of pain that lingered there. The hospital corridor buzzed with hurried footsteps, soft whispers, and the beeping rhythm of life and death. In one corner room lay a young man named Ethan Marshall, barely 24, his skin pale, his lips dry, his breath faint. Tubes ran into his arms like weak vines trying to hold on to a dying tree. Outside his room, a storm was brewing, not from the sky, but between his parents. "I told you this would happen," Mr. Marshall barked, his deep voice echoing through the corridor. That boy never listened, always wasting money on useless ideas. "Now see, months in this hospital and no improvement. I'm done paying." Mrs. Marshall stood with her purse clutched tightly against her chest. She looked beautiful and heartless all at once. Her hair perfectly set, her perfume expensive, but her eyes void of compassion. "He's our son," she whispered weakly. "Our son?" her husband snapped. "He's a grown man, old enough to take care of himself. If God wanted him alive, he wouldn't let him waste our money like this." A young doctor tried to interrupt gently. "Sir, please. He's responding to treatment. We just need a few more weeks. The infection is serious, but he can recover." Mr. Marshall cut him off, waving the papers in his face. "No more treatment. I'm signing him out. You can do what you like." The doctor froze, disbelief clouding his face. "Sir, if you discharge him now, he could die. That's not my problem." Mrs. Marshall lowered her head. Somewhere deep inside her, a mother's voice begged her to speak up, to stop her husband, to fight for her son. But fear of her husband's anger silenced her. When the doctor tried to stop them, she gently pulled him aside and whispered, "Please don't make this harder. We've decided." Then she followed her husband down the hall, heels clicking coldly against the tiles, the sound fading like the last drops of mercy. Inside the ward, Ethan stirred. He heard muffled voices, felt the tension, and tried to open his eyes. Through blurry vision, he saw only the nurse adjusting his drip. "Where's my dad?" he asked weakly. The nurse hesitated. "Just rest, okay?" "No, tell me," he insisted. She looked away. They had to go home for now. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "It's fine," he said softly, though his heart shattered. When the door closed, he turned his face toward the window. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping gently on the glass like small fingers reminding him of life. But all he felt was emptiness. Hours passed. The rain grew stronger. A nurse entered with a brown envelope, the hospital bill. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said quietly. "Without payment, we can't continue your treatment. The management has already discharged you." "Discharged?" His voice cracked. "But I can't even walk." She didn't answer. Her eyes said everything. She turned off the machines, pulled out the tubes, and handed him his bag of clothes. When she left, Ethan lay motionless, staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded in. His father's laughter during family dinners, his mother's soft hands when he was a child, the promise of love that once filled their home. All gone now. "Maybe I'm truly alone," he whispered to himself. A janitor entered, sweeping slowly. The old man, Mr. Paul, had watched Ethan's decline for weeks. He saw the sadness in his eyes and felt a strange pull toward the boy. "You're leaving?" he asked softly. "They said my parents took all my things," Ethan replied, his voice trembling. "They even emptied my bank account." Mr. Paul sighed deeply. "People change when money blinds them. But don't lose hope. Son, hope is stronger than any sickness." Ethan tried to smile, but tears escaped instead. That night, when the ward lights went off, Mr. Paul came back quietly with a bowl of porridge. "Eat something. You'll need strength." Ethan sat up slowly, hands shaking. "Why are you helping me?" The old man smiled sadly. "Because once I lay on a hospital bed too, and someone helped me. I promised God that if I ever met a soul in need, I'd do the same." Ethan's eyes softened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me you won't give up. The next morning, Ethan tried to stand. His legs trembled, but he forced himself upright. The nurse who had pitied him watched from afar, biting her lip. Are you sure you can walk? I have to, he said. If I stay here, I'll die in spirit before body. She slipped a small envelope into his hand. It's not much, but it can buy you food. He opened it. 500 naira. He almost cried again. You don't know what this means. She smiled faintly. Don't lose your kindness, no matter what they did. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets glistened wet and cold. Ethan walked slowly through the gate, each step heavy but filled with defiance. Behind him, the hospital loomed like a ghost from his past. Ahead, the world stretched wide and merciless. He found a bench near a bus stop and sat there till night. Cars sped by. People hurried home to their families. He watched them, wondering what it felt like to be loved without conditions. Days turned into nights, and hunger returned. He begged at roadside shops, earning coins that barely fed him. Once, a boy threw bread at him mockingly. Ethan picked it up, dusted it off, and ate quietly. One day, he whispered, I'll never beg again. He slept under an abandoned shed near the market. Rats squeaked. Rain leaked through the holes, but he didn't care. At least here, no one could abandon him again. One morning, he woke to see Mr. Paul standing there with a small bag of food. The old man smiled. I've been looking for you. You shouldn't have, Ethan said, embarrassed. Nonsense. You're young, strong. Don't waste your life pitying yourself. Come to my place tomorrow. I know someone who might give you work. The next day, Ethan followed him across dusty streets to a small mechanic shop at the edge of town. The owner, Mr. Reed, was shouting at his workers. Can't you people tighten a bolt properly? You'll kill a customer one day. When he saw Ethan, he frowned. Who's this? Mr. Paul said calmly. A good boy who needs a chance. Reed laughed. He looks half dead. Try him, Mr. Paul urged. If he fails, send him away. Reed sighed. Fine. Clean that engine. Ethan worked silently, hands trembling but steady. Within an hour, the dusty engine gleamed like new. Reed whistled softly. Not bad for a sick man. From that day, Ethan worked at the shop, cleaning, fixing, and learning. He earned little, but he found dignity. Each night, he collapsed on a mat in the corner, whispering, I'm still alive. One afternoon, as he scrubbed oil off his hands, a car pulled in. The driver honked impatiently. Inside sat a young nurse, Clara, the same one who had once slipped him money at the hospital. When she saw him, her eyes widened. You're alive! He smiled shyly. Barely. You look stronger. Maybe because I have something to prove. She laughed softly. You always did. They talked for a while, and she gave him lunch. You can't work on an empty stomach, she said. When she left, Ethan felt something stir inside, a reminder that kindness still existed. Weeks turned to months. Ethan learned fast. Customers liked him because he worked with heart. Mr. Reed trusted him to handle jobs alone. Slowly, Ethan began to save. He bought second-hand clothes, shoes, and a small radio. He'd sit at night, listening to news about young inventors changing the world. One day, he whispered, that'll be me. But deep inside, the wound of betrayal still burned. Sometimes he'd look up at the stars and ask, why do they hate me so much? What did I do wrong? He never got an answer. Yet each morning he rose again. Work after work, day after day. The world didn't give him love, but it gave him a reason to fight. One Friday evening, a wealthy foreigner's car broke down near the shop. Ethan fixed it quickly and explained the problem with rare precision. The man looked impressed. You're very smart, he said. Did you study engineering? Ethan smiled faintly. No, sir, just experience. Experience and brains, the man said, handing him his card. If you ever get a chance to study, take it. People like you don't come twice in a lifetime. That night, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling. His heart pounded with strange hope. For the first time since his abandonment, he saw a small light at the end of his long, dark tunnel. At dawn, he packed his few belongings and walked to Mr. Paul's house. The old man was sweeping the front yard. "You look like a man with a plan," he said, smiling. Ethan nodded. "I don't know how, but I'm going to school. I'll work, I'll save, and I'll study." Mr. Paul patted his shoulder. "That's the spirit. You'll rise again, Ethan. Just remember, never let bitterness grow where faith should be." Ethan smiled through tears. "I'll never forget you." As the morning sun broke through the clouds, he set off down the dusty road, his shadow long behind him, his future stretching wide ahead. He didn't have family anymore, but he had something far stronger, a dream and the courage to chase it. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, brushing golden light across rusted rooftops and dusty streets. Ethan walked through the neighborhood with his worn bag slung over one shoulder, determination in every step. His body was thin, but his spirit glowed with something new, an unbreakable will. He had no destination, just a direction. He followed the road leading away from the slums toward the city, where dreams were sold like promises and broken like glass. Along the way, he stopped by a food vendor's stand. The woman looked at him curiously as he handed her a few coins. "Bread and groundnut, please," he said softly. She served him with pity in her eyes. "You new around here?" "Yes, Ma," he replied, trying to find work. She nodded. "Work is scarce, but God rewards honest hands." He smiled faintly and thanked her, walking off with his breakfast. Those words stayed with him. God rewards honest hands. By noon, he reached the bus park where men shouted, engines roared, and smoke filled the air. Drivers were hiring conductors for long-distance routes, but they wanted men with experience. Ethan approached one of them. "Sir, I can learn fast," he pleaded. The man looked at him, unimpressed. "We need energy, not bones. Go and eat first." Ethan forced a smile and walked away. Rejection didn't sting anymore. It had become part of his skin. He spent the rest of the day wandering from one shop to another, asking for work. Mechanics, carpenters, welders. Nobody wanted a boy with no connection. When evening came, he found himself near the bridge where children played in dirty water and old men smoked silently. He sat beside them, staring at the orange sky. For a moment, hopelessness whispered in his ear again. "Maybe this is all your life will ever be." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and muttered, "No, I wasn't kept alive just to die struggling." That night, he found shelter behind a closed bakery. The smell of stale bread comforted him. As he lay on the ground, the noise of passing cars lulled him to sleep. In his dream, he saw his parents' faces again, their cold eyes, their harsh voices. He woke up trembling, tears wetting his cheeks. "Why couldn't you love me?" he whispered into the night. The following days tested every bit of strength he had left. He washed cars for small tips. Sometimes he went 2 days without food. Yet every time despair tried to crush him, he remembered Mr. Paul's words, "Don't let bitterness grow where faith should be." One afternoon, he returned to the same mechanic shop where he once worked for Mr. Reed. The shop was busier now, filled with noise and shouting. Ethan stood quietly by the gate until the foreman noticed him. "You again?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. "I want to work again. I'll do anything." The foreman sighed. "We can't pay you much. I just need a chance." After a long pause, the man nodded. "Fine. Start tomorrow, 6 in the morning." Ethan smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you, sir." He slept behind the shop that night, on a thin mat. When the morning came, he worked like his life depended on it. Scrubbing, carrying, fixing, learning. He watched how cars came in broken and left renewed. It reminded him of himself. Over the weeks, his hands grew stronger. He began to earn a small wage. He saved every coin in a tin can under his mat. Clara, the nurse, still visited the area sometimes to fix her car. She noticed him again one afternoon. "Ethan," she said, surprised. "You work here now?" He smiled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes, I'm learning fast." She nodded approvingly. "You've changed. You look peaceful. I'm trying to be. She looked at him curiously. What about your parents? Have you gone to see them? His eyes darkened for a moment, then softened. No, some doors are better left closed. She didn't push further. Instead, she handed him a small food pack. Eat before you faint again. He laughed lightly. You're always feeding me. Maybe one day you'll feed me, too, she teased, smiling before driving off. That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her words. Maybe one day you'll feed me, too. He didn't know why, but they gave him a strange kind of hope, something to look forward to beyond just survival. Months rolled by, and Ethan became one of the best workers at the shop. Customers started asking for him by name. Where's that quiet one, they'd say. He fixes things like a magician. Mr. Reed noticed a change, too. You're a different boy, he said one morning. Most people complain about what they don't have. You just work. Ethan smiled. Work is the only thing I have left. Mr. Reed nodded slowly. Keep that fire. It will take you far. But fate wasn't done testing him yet. One evening, as he was closing the shop, he heard the distant sound of sirens. A fire had broken out at a nearby building. The wind carried smoke and screams through the air. Without thinking, Ethan ran toward it. It was the bakery where he used to sleep behind months ago. Flames licked the roof, and people shouted for help. Inside, a child was trapped near the back door. The crowd was afraid to enter, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled off his shirt, covered his face, and ran into the burning building. The heat was unbearable. Smoke filled his lungs, but he pushed forward, following the child's cries. He found a little girl crouched near the oven, crying for her mother. Come here, he shouted, wrapping her in his arms. He carried her out to the back door just before the roof collapsed. The crowd cheered as he stumbled out, coughing and gasping. The child's mother fell to her knees, crying, God bless you. God bless you. Ethan didn't answer. He just nodded weakly. Firefighters arrived minutes later, but the bakery was gone. Still, the town remembered his bravery. For the first time in his life, people looked at him with admiration, not pity. That night, Clara heard the story and rushed to the mechanic's shop. She found him sitting on the floor, his arm bandaged. You're insane, she said, half angry, half relieved. He smiled faintly. The child was crying. I couldn't leave her. You could have died. Maybe, he said softly. But then, I have died doing something right. She stared at him for a long moment, tears gathering in her eyes. You really don't see it, do you? See what? You're not just surviving, Ethan. You're living. You're extraordinary. Her words sank deep into him, deeper than she knew. For years, Ethan had believed he was nothing, a burden, a disappointment. But now, someone saw worth in him again. Weeks later, Clara brought him an envelope. A friend of mine works at an NGO that sponsors students who can't afford school. They're offering scholarships for technical studies. I already told them about you. Ethan froze. You did what? She grinned. I gave them your name. You have an interview next week. He blinked in disbelief. Clara, why would you do that? Because you deserve it, she said simply. He opened the envelope and saw the letter inside. Shortlisted candidates will be considered for training abroad. His hands trembled. He looked up at her, speechless. Don't waste a chance, she said. You've worked too hard for the world not to see it. He nodded slowly. I'll try. You won't just try, she replied. You'll win. The interview day came quickly. Ethan wore the cleanest shirt he owned. His heart pounded as he entered the big office filled with polished floors and air conditioning that reminded him of the hospital days. He stood before 3 judges who looked at him curiously. Tell us about yourself, one of them said. He swallowed hard. My name is Ethan Marshall. I grew up in this town. I've worked as a mechanic for 2 years. I may not have formal education, but I learn fast. If you give me a chance, I'll make you proud. They whispered among themselves, then asked, Why do you want the scholarship? He looked down for a moment, then met their eyes. Because I want to build machines that save lives. I want no one to be left in a hospital bed, abandoned because of money. I want to change that. The room went silent. One of the judges nodded, visibly moved. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. We'll be in touch. Days passed with no word. Every morning, Ethan checked his phone, hoping. Every night, he prayed quietly. He continued working, pretending not to care, but deep down, hope flickered like a candle. Then one afternoon, as he was tightening a bolt, his phone rang. The number was unknown. "Hello," he said, wiping sweat from his face. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking to Ethan Marshall?" "Yes." "This is the International Technical Foundation. Congratulations. You've been selected for the scholarship." His wrench slipped from his hand. "What?" "You're going abroad for your training. We'll send you the details by email." He stood frozen, unable to speak. Tears gathered in his eyes. Thank you so much." When the call ended, he sat on the floor, laughing and crying all at once. Mr. Reed came out, confused. "What's wrong with you, boy?" Ethan could barely speak. I got it." "Got what?" "The scholarship." Reed smiled widely and clapped him on the back. "You see? Hard work never hides." When Clara heard the news, she ran to the shop, hugging him tightly. I told you you'd win." He laughed, still shaking. "I can't believe it." "Believe it," she said softly. "You're not the boy they left anymore." That evening, as he packed his few belongings, he walked to Mr. Paul's house one last time. The old man was sitting outside, drinking tea. "I heard the news," Mr. Paul said, smiling. "My boy, you're flying higher than I ever did." Ethan knelt before him. "You saved my life, sir. I can never repay you." "You already have," Mr. Paul said gently, "by proving that kindness still works." They both sat quietly as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world felt different now, bigger, brighter, full of promise. As the first stars appeared, Ethan whispered, "One day, I'll come back stronger. I'll build something that will help others like me." Mr. Paul nodded. "And when you do, remember this. Never let success make you forget your scars. They are proof that you survived." Ethan smiled through his tears. "I'll never forget." He stood, adjusted his small bag, and walked away into the night. Each step echoed like a heartbeat of destiny. The boy who had been left to die was now walking into a future no one could have imagined. The pain of survival had become the seed of greatness. The airplane trembled as it broke through the clouds. Ethan sat by the window, watching the tiny city lights fade beneath him like dying stars. His heart beat fast. He had never flown before. Every sound, every jolt made him grip the armrest tighter, but beneath the nervousness was awe and gratitude. He thought of the path that had brought him here, the hospital, the rain, the mechanic shop, Clara's kindness, Mr. Paul's wisdom. Each memory was a brick in the long, uneven road that led to this moment. The flight attendant smiled as she walked by. "First time flying?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said shyly. "You'll get used to it," she replied warmly. "You're headed somewhere good." He nodded, looking out the window again. "I hope so." When the plane landed many hours later, the cold hit him first. It was unlike anything he'd ever felt. His breath came out like smoke as he stepped into the foreign land. Tall glass buildings, people in thick coats, voices that sounded strange yet musical. He clutched his small bag tightly, afraid to get lost. A man from the scholarship office stood at the arrival's gate, holding a sign with his name. "Ethan Marshall? Welcome." Ethan smiled nervously. "Thank you, sir." The man drove him through clean streets lined with trees and lights that never seemed to end. The buildings looked like mirrors, reflecting a world far from the one he came from. Ethan pressed his face slightly against the car window, amazed. "This will be your accommodation," the man said when they arrived at a small dormitory beside the technical college. "Orientation starts tomorrow. Be early." Inside his room, Ethan sat on the bed, staring at the plain white walls. It felt strange being surrounded by silence and comfort. Back home, he had always slept to the sound of shouting, generators, or rain. Here, there was only calm. He knelt beside the bed and whispered, "God, thank you. I don't know what's ahead, but help me make this count." That night, he slept like a man with purpose. The first day of class was overwhelming. Students from all over the world filled the hall, some loud, some proud, some friendly. Ethan felt small among them. When the lecturer began speaking about machines, engines, and innovation, Ethan listened with eyes wide open. He understood more than he expected. Years of working at the mechanic shop had trained his mind more than books ever did. During lunch, a tall student named Liam sat beside him. "You're from Africa, right?" "Yes," Ethan replied cautiously. "Cool. I'm from Ireland," Liam said, extending a hand. "What's your story?" Ethan smiled faintly. "It's long. I've got time." By the end of lunch, Liam knew part of it. How Ethan had been abandoned but never gave up. He shook his head in disbelief. "Man, that's insane. You're tougher than most people I know." Ethan shrugged. "Pain teaches you things comfort never will." From that day, Liam became his closest friend. They studied together, worked late in the lab, and shared dreams. Liam often joked, "When you make your millions, don't forget me." Ethan laughed every time, but secretly promised himself he never would. Weeks turned into months. Ethan worked harder than anyone else. When others partied, he stayed in the workshop. When others complained about the weather, he pushed through the cold. Slowly, his project began to stand out. He built small engine models that worked better than the ones from the textbook. His professors noticed. One day, after a presentation, his instructor called him aside. "You have something special, Ethan. Your designs are simple but brilliant. Ever thought about developing them commercially?" Ethan blinked. "Commercially?" "Yes. There are investors looking for minds like yours. If you keep this up, you'd change lives." Those words ignited a fire in him. That night, he drew sketches until dawn. Machines that could power small hospitals, tools that could save lives in rural areas. Ideas born from the pain of his own past. He remembered the hospital bed, the sound of the rain, and whispered, "If I ever get rich, I'll build hospitals for people like me." During one of his projects, he met a woman named Grace, an intern from another faculty who volunteered to assist him with medical equipment designs. She was calm, focused, and carried a kindness that reminded him of Clara. Her eyes were gentle, her laughter soft. "You work too hard," she teased one evening. "Even machines need rest." "I'll rest when people stop dying because of money," Ethan replied. She studied him quietly. "You've seen pain, haven't you?" He nodded. "More than I can forget." She smiled faintly. "Then make sure the world benefits from it." They became close, not as lovers, but as two souls who understood each other's purpose. She shared her dream of helping poor communities, and he told her about his vision of affordable healthcare machines. "Maybe one day," she said, "we can work together on something big." "Maybe one day," he agreed. 3 years passed like a whisper. Ethan graduated top of his class. On the day of the ceremony, he stood before hundreds of students and guests, dressed in a suit for the first time. When he received his award, the hall erupted in applause. The dean handed him a certificate and said, "You are proof that background does not determine destiny." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He looked around the hall, imagining Mr. Paul, Clara, even his parents, and for a brief moment, he wished they could see him now. After graduation, a representative from a global tech firm approached him. "We've reviewed your final project, a portable power generator for rural clinics. It's brilliant. Would you be interested in a partnership?" Ethan could hardly speak. "Yes, of course." "Then welcome aboard," the man said, shaking his hand. That was the beginning of everything. In the months that followed, Ethan poured his heart into work. His designs were turned into real products, small, efficient machines that could power hospital wards, incubators, and life support systems without electricity. His inventions spread across developing countries. Newspapers called him the boy who brought light to the poor. But success didn't change him. Every paycheck he received, he sent a portion back home to charity hospitals. He built a small foundation in Mr. Paul's name, funding free medical care for abandoned patients. Grace worked with him on several projects. One day, while they stood overlooking a hospital that had just received his equipment, she said softly, "You did it, Ethan. You turned pain into purpose." He smiled. "Pain was my first teacher." She looked at him with admiration. "Most people let pain destroy them. You use it to build others." Ethan sighed. Maybe that's the only way to win against it. Still, at night, when the world was quiet, memories crept in. He'd sit by his window, staring at the city lights, thinking of home. He wondered if his parents ever thought of him. Did they regret it? Did they miss him? The thought didn't hurt as much as before, but it lingered like a scar that never faded. Sometimes he wrote letters he never sent, to Mr. Paul, to Clara, even to his parents. In one of them, he wrote, "I have forgiven you, though you never asked for it. I understand now that some people abandon others not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to love. Still, I pray you find peace." He folded that letter carefully and kept it in a small box. It reminded him that forgiveness was freedom. 5 years after he first left home, Ethan returned briefly to his country for the opening of a new medical facility his company had sponsored. The air smelled of dust and roasted corn. Crowds gathered as the governor shook his hand. Cameras flashed, children waved, and banners read, "Welcome home, Ethan Marshall." As he cut the ribbon, reporters surrounded him. One asked, "Sir, what inspired your work?" Ethan smiled. "A hospital bed and a kind janitor," he said simply. The crowd laughed softly, thinking it was a joke, but his eyes told another story. After the ceremony, he visited the old hospital quietly, without security or cameras. The building had been renovated, painted bright white. He walked through the corridors, memories flooding back. He found the old janitor's office empty now, dusty but familiar. On the desk lay a framed photo of Mr. Paul, with a word in loving memory, "A man of kindness." Ethan sank into the chair, tears rolling freely. "You kept your promise, oh man, and I kept mine." He placed a small bouquet of flowers on the desk. "Rest well." Before leaving, he met one of the new nurses and donated a large check to the hospital's free ward. "No patient should ever be abandoned here again," he said. As he boarded the plane back abroad, Ethan looked out the window, watching the city lights fade once more. But this time, he wasn't leaving in search of a future. He was returning with purpose fulfilled. Liam met him at the airport overseas, shouting, "The hero returns." Ethan laughed. "I'm no hero." "Yes, you are," Liam said, grinning. "And heroes deserve rest. You've been working nonstop. When are you taking a break?" Ethan smiled thoughtfully. "Soon, but there's still more to do." He knew destiny wasn't done with him yet. There were still people to help, still debts of kindness to repay. The world had given him recognition, but his heart still searched for peace. Late that night, he stood by his apartment window, the city glittering below. "I'm not done yet," he whispered to himself. The world hasn't seen the full story. And somewhere deep inside, he felt a stirring, as if fate was preparing the next chapter of his life. He didn't know it yet, but the same world that had once abandoned him was soon going to bow before the man he had become. The journey of pain had only just begun to bloom into greatness. The morning sun rose slowly over the city of Lagos, turning the lagoon into molten gold. Traffic horns blared, Danfo buses honked, and hawkers' voices filled the air with life and noise. Amid that chaos, a long black convoy glided through the streets, silent and powerful. People turned to stare, murmuring among themselves. "Now who be that?" one man asked. "Dem say na one big man way just come back from abroad," another replied. Inside the lead car, Ethan sat quietly, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. The world outside moved fast, but inside his heart, time felt slower, heavier. Every street corner seemed familiar, yet different. Lagos had grown, but so had he. He had come back for one reason, to build something lasting. After years abroad, his inventions had made him one of the youngest billionaires in Africa. His company, Marshall Tech Foundation, supplied affordable power systems and medical tools to dozens of countries. Yet, he had never returned home, not until now. As the car drove past the bridge near the General Hospital, Ethan's chest tightened. The image of his younger self flashed, thin, weak, lying on a hospital bed while his parents walked away. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "That chapter is gone." The car stopped at a massive construction site near Lekki. Cranes swung overhead, workers shouted, and banners read, "Future Site of Marshall Medical City." It would be the largest free hospital in West Africa, built for people who couldn't afford care. His assistant, Victor, stepped forward. "Sir, the press is waiting for your statement." Ethan nodded. He walked toward the stage set up for the ceremony. Cameras flashed as he adjusted the microphone. His voice, calm and deep, carried over the crowd. "When I was 24, he began, I lay in a hospital bed with no one beside me. I learned that pain can break you or build you. I chose to let it build me. Today, this land will carry a promise that no one will ever be abandoned again because of money." The audience erupted in applause. Some reporters wiped their eyes. Others whispered among themselves, trying to piece together who this man really was. When the ceremony ended, Ethan stepped aside, watching the workers cheer. Victor handed him a bottle of water. "Sir, that speech will trend everywhere." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let it trend for the right reason, kindness." That evening, he visited the new foundation headquarters in Ikoyi. The building gleamed with glass and gold light, a symbol of everything he had built from nothing. In the lobby, his portrait hung beside the slogan, "Compassion creates change." His staff stood to greet him as he entered the conference room. "Welcome back, sir." Ethan nodded. "Thank you all. I know this company is more than business. It's purpose. Keep that in mind always." They nodded, inspired. After the meeting, he stood alone by the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies. The reflection of his own face stared back at him, older, sharper, stronger. Yet, behind the success, he still saw the boy who once cried under the rain outside a hospital gate. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Victor stepped in. "Sir, you have visitors." "Who?" He hesitated. "An elderly couple. They say they knew you a long time ago." Ethan frowned slightly. "Did they give their names?" Victor nodded. "Mr. and Mrs. Marshall." The words hit like thunder. Ethan froze, his hand gripping the window frame. "Send them away." "Sir." He turned slowly, his eyes clouded. "Tell them I'm busy." Victor nodded quietly and left. For a long moment, Ethan stood still. His heart raced. He walked to his desk, sat down, and buried his face in his hands. "Why now?" he whispered. "After all these years?" Across town, Mr. and Mrs. Marshall sat in the back of a taxi, silent and uneasy. The years had not been kind to them. Their mansion was gone, their cars sold, their health failing. Mr. Marshall's hair had turned white, and his wife's once perfect hands now trembled. When the security guard had told them the boss wouldn't see them, Mrs. Marshall's eyes had filled with tears. "I just wanted to apologize," she whispered. Her husband said nothing. Pride and regret battled in his chest. The driver asked gently, "Should I drop you back home?" Mr. Marshall sighed. "Home? We don't have one." They drove off into the night, the city lights reflecting in their tired eyes. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the balcony of his penthouse apartment, the sea breeze brushing against his face. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's trembling hands and his father's stern face. He could still hear that moment at the hospital. He's a grown man, old enough to take care of himself. He clenched his fists, then exhaled. Maybe this is fate testing me again. In the quiet of that night, he made a decision. The next morning, he told Victor, "Find out where they live." Victor nodded. "Yes, sir." Within hours, he returned. They're living in a small rented room in a Jeej. The landlord says they've missed 2 months' rent. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Prepare a parcel for them. Food, money, clothes. Don't say who it's from." Victor blinked. "Sir, they might guess." "Let them," Ethan said softly. "It's not about pride. It's about peace." 2 days later, Victor returned with a story. "Sir," they cried when they received the package. "The old woman said she hasn't seen food that good in years." Ethan nodded quietly. He didn't ask for details. He just stared out the window again, his reflection blending with the skyline. Later that week, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A trembling voice spoke. "It's your mother." He closed his eyes. "How did you get this number?" "Your driver gave it to us." "Please, we just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Please, son, we were wrong. We were foolish. We thought we were protecting ourselves. We never thought you'd survive." Ethan's voice cracked, though he fought to stay calm. "You thought I'd die, so you took everything and left me to rot." Tears filled her voice. "We've suffered too, Ethan. We lost everything. We've lived with regret every day." He sighed deeply, resting his head on the chair. "Regret doesn't erase pain." "I know," she whispered. "But please just see us once. That's all I ask." Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office." When the call ended, he sat still for several minutes, staring at nothing. His chest felt heavy, his heart confused. The next morning came too quickly. Ethan arrived early at the office, dressed in a dark suit. He couldn't focus on his meetings. His mind replayed the past like a film, the abandonment, the struggle, the miracle of survival. At exactly 10 o'clock, Victor knocked and opened the door gently. "They're here, sir." Ethan took a deep breath. "Send them in." The door opened slowly. His parents entered, looking fragile, unsure, and older than he remembered. His mother clutched her wrapper. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw him. "Ethan," she whispered. He looked at them, expressionless. "Sit down." They sat quietly. The room was so silent they could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Mrs. Marshall began to cry softly. "We don't deserve to be here, but I couldn't live another day without asking for your forgiveness." Ethan's father cleared his throat, his voice shaking. "I failed you, son. I failed as a man and as a father. I don't expect forgiveness, but I came to face what I ran from." Ethan looked at them for a long time. "When you left me in that hospital," he began slowly, "I thought my life was over. I was angry, bitter, lost. But someone showed me kindness. A man who had nothing gave me everything you wouldn't. Because of him, I learned to forgive." Tears streamed down his mother's face. "We were blinded by pride." "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "And pride costs more than money." His father lowered his head. "You're right." Ethan stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. "I built everything you once thought I couldn't, but it doesn't make me happy to see you suffer." He turned back to them, his voice calm but firm. "You will never go hungry again. I'll provide a home for you, and you'll have medical care for the rest of your lives. But understand this. I forgave you long ago, not for you, but for me, because hate is too heavy to carry." His mother covered her face, sobbing. His father's eyes glistened, though he tried to hide it. Ethan walked closer, placing an envelope on the table. "There's a house deed in there. You can move in tomorrow." They both stood, shaking. "Thank you, my son," his mother whispered, reaching out. He hesitated, then took her hand gently. "Let's not dwell on the past. Just live in peace." As they turned to leave, his father paused at the door. "You become more of a man than I ever was." Ethan didn't answer. He just nodded, his heart full but calm. When they left, he sat back down, tears finally falling. He whispered to himself, "Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it frees the soul." He leaned back, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, felt true peace. The boy who once had nothing had returned not just with wealth, but with grace. The world had watched him rise from the dust, and the story was only beginning. The rain poured heavily that night, drumming on the glass walls of Ethan's penthouse like 1,000 restless fingers. Thunder rolled across the lagoon, and flashes of lightning painted the sky silver. He sat alone in his office, staring at a single photograph on his desk. The new house deed he had given his parents. It had been 3 months since he forgave them. He visited once in a while, sending food and nurses to care for them. They were comfortable now, living quietly in a modest bungalow on the outskirts of town. The world had called Ethan merciful. Journalists wrote articles with headlines like, Billionaire reunites with parents who betrayed him, but inside his heart, peace was fragile. He wasn't angry anymore, but he wasn't healed either. The storm outside reminded him of the storm that was coming, one he didn't yet see. In their new home, Mrs. Marshall sat by the window knitting a scarf. Her face had softened since Ethan's forgiveness, but guilt still clung to her like perfume that never fades. Mr. Marshall read the newspaper silently until his wife spoke. "Do you think he truly forgave us?" she asked. Mr. Marshall sighed. "He gave us a home, didn't he? That's more forgiveness than we deserve." "I still feel like I'm waiting for punishment," she whispered. He looked at her sadly. "Maybe our punishment is living long enough to see the child we threw away become greater than us." Silence filled the room. Outside, rain splattered against the window, echoing the way of their words. Then the phone rang. Mrs. Marshall answered. "Hello." "Good evening, madam," a man's voice said. "This is from Zenith Bank. We have some concerns about the accounts linked to your husband's old business." Her hands trembled. "That company was closed years ago." "Yes, ma'am," the man continued, "but there are irregular transactions tied to fraud reports. We'll need both of you to come for questioning." Her breath caught. "Fraud." "Yes, ma'am. It's quite serious." She dropped the phone, her face pale. "It's starting again," she whispered. Mr. Marshall stood quickly. "What is it?" "The bank," she said weakly. "They're investigating your old company." He ran a hand over his head, panic flashing in his eyes. "That was 10 years ago. They can't." "They can," she interrupted. "And if they dig deep enough, they'll find everything you did back then." He sank into a chair. No, not now. Not when we finally have peace." By morning, the news had broken. Headlines screamed, "New corruption trail linked to former business of billionaire's parents." Ethan's phone rang nonstop. His assistant, Victor, rushed in with a tablet. "Sir, you need to see this." Ethan scrolled through the article. His parents' names were plastered everywhere. Illegal transfers, property forgery, tax evasion. The press had already connected them to him. Victor looked anxious. "It's trending, sir. People are saying your wealth came from their crimes." Ethan stood slowly, the world spinning around him. "Call the legal team. Fix a press statement. I don't want anyone dragged into this." "Yes, sir," Victor said, hurrying out. Ethan collapsed into his chair, rubbing his temples. "Why now?" he murmured. "Why can't the past stay buried?" By evening, social media was on fire. Some called him the saint hiding behind charity. Others defended him, saying he had nothing to do with his parents' past. But rumors moved faster than truth. Clara, who had returned from abroad to work with his foundation, called him. "Ethan, are you okay?" He tried to sound calm. "I'm fine. Just another storm." "You're not fine," she said softly. "I can hear it in your voice. You always carry everyone's pain, but you never let anyone carry yours." He smiled faintly. "You still talk like a nurse." "Because you still act like a patient," she replied gently. "Don't let this destroy the good you've done." He sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if good is ever enough." "It is," she said firmly, "but only if you don't let bitterness win this time." Her words hit deep. He thanked her and ended the call, staring out at the rain again. He had built his empire on forgiveness, but now that same forgiveness was being tested. 2 days later, his parents came to his office. They looked broken, frightened. Security almost didn't let them in because of the reporters outside. When they entered, Mrs. Marshall began to cry immediately. "Ethan, they're saying we'll be arrested. Please help us." He remained seated, expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about your business before?" His father lowered his head. "I thought it was behind us. I did things I shouldn't have to keep the company afloat. Forged papers. Took loans I couldn't pay. When everything crashed, I ran." Ethan's chest tightened. "And you left me in a hospital while you ran." "Yes," his father whispered, "and I've regretted it every day since." Mrs. Marshall reached for Ethan's hand. "Please, son, we'll die if we go to prison." He looked away, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I can't stop the law, but I'll make sure you have a fair trial. That's all I can do." His mother fell to her knees. "Please, Ethan, they'll destroy our names." Ethan rose slowly. "You destroyed your own names long before this day." His father looked up, shame flooding his face. "You're right. We deserve whatever comes. But if there's any part of your heart that still calls us family, help your mother. She won't survive prison." Ethan's voice softened. "I'll do what I can, but I won't lie for you." That night, he couldn't sleep again. He walked through his penthouse, restless, thinking of everything. The past felt like a shadow, refusing to leave him. In the quiet hours before dawn, he sat on his balcony and whispered to the sky, "Why do I keep paying for their sins?" He didn't realize that sometimes healing must pass through fire. The next morning, his lawyer arrived with documents. "Sir, we've reached an agreement. The authorities will drop criminal charges if your parents repay the debts and surrender the old company's assets." Ethan frowned. "How much?" "Almost 2 billion naira." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "That's everything I've made from this year's contracts." The lawyer hesitated. "You don't have to do this personally, sir." Ethan opened his eyes slowly. "Yes, I do. They gave me life, even if they didn't know what to do with it. I'll pay it. Let them go free." The lawyer nodded quietly. "You're a good man, sir." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, just a man trying to end a cycle." When his parents heard the news, they couldn't believe it. Mrs. Marshall wept uncontrollably. "He paid for us again," she sobbed. "After all we did." Mr. Marshall sat in silence for hours, staring at the floor. Finally, he said softly, "We destroyed him once, and he saved us twice." They both decided to visit him one last time. When they arrived, they found him in the Foundation's garden, tending to flowers planted in memory of Mr. Paul. His mother approached slowly. "Ethan, I don't know what to say anymore." He looked up and smiled faintly. "Then don't say anything. Just promise me you'll live honestly." She nodded, tears streaming. His father's voice broke. "Son, you have every right to hate us." "I don't hate you," Ethan said. "I just learned that some wounds never close. They just stop bleeding." The older man swallowed hard. "I wish I had half your strength." Ethan looked at him, then at the sky. Strength isn't born from success. It's born from surviving what was meant to destroy you. They stood together for a moment, the air heavy with silence and peace. Then Ethan said softly, "Go home, Dad. Take care of Mom. Live quietly. That's all I want." As they left, Mrs. Marshall turned back and whispered, "You're the kind of man I prayed your father would be." Ethan didn't answer. He just smiled sadly and watched them walk away. Weeks later, the story changed. The headlines read, "Billionaire clears parents' name, donates 2 billion to anti-corruption drive." People praised him again, but Ethan didn't care for praise anymore. He knew every good deed came with its scars. He stood one evening at the balcony of the new hospital, overlooking the city. The building glowed under the setting sun, the words Marshall Medical City shining bright. Doctors and nurses moved like angels inside. Patients smiled. Lives were being saved. Clara walked up beside him, holding a cup of tea. "You did it," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "No, we did it." "You could have let your parents face prison," she said. "No one would have blamed you." He looked at her, eyes distant. "But I would have blamed myself." She nodded. "You're still that same boy who refused to stop believing in people." "Maybe," he said quietly. "But I've learned something. Forgiveness doesn't mean trust. It just means freedom." She smiled, watching him with admiration. "So what's next for you, Ethan Marshall?" He took a slow breath. "Next? I build bigger. Not for me, but for every soul who ever thought their story was over." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "And maybe one day you'll let yourself rest." He laughed gently. "Maybe one day." That night, as the city lights blinked below, Ethan stood alone by his window once more. The rain had stopped. The clouds had cleared. He whispered into the silence, "You can rise from dust, but never forget where you came from." Far away, in a small house where peace finally lived again, Mr. and Mrs. Marshall knelt together in prayer, thanking the son they once abandoned, the son who had taught them that mercy was stronger than pride. The man they left to die had become their savior. And though the world called him a billionaire, Ethan knew what he really was: a survivor of love lost, found, and reborn. The wind carried the sound of cameras clicking and people cheering. Lagos had never seen such a crowd. The Marshall Medical City was finally ready for its grand opening, and dignitaries from across Africa had come to witness it. The hospital stood tall and silver under the afternoon sun, surrounded by flags, flowers, and smiling faces. Ethan arrived in a dark suit, stepping out of a sleek black car. Security surrounded him. Journalists shouted questions, and flashbulbs painted the air white. He smiled politely but didn't speak. To the world, this was celebration. To him, it was remembrance. He had built this place on the ashes of his pain. As he walked up the red carpet, the announcer's voice echoed through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man whose vision brought this dream to life, Mr. Ethan Marshall." Applause thundered. People stood. Ethan bowed slightly and approached the podium. His voice was calm, deliberate, and heavy with emotion. 10 years ago, he began, I lay helpless in a hospital, abandoned and forgotten. That day, I made a promise that if I ever rose again, I would build a place where no one else would feel the pain I did. Today, that promise is standing before you. The audience erupted in cheers. But even as he smiled, his eyes glistened. He wasn't speaking for them. He was speaking to the ghosts of his past. He cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed, and the crowd poured in to tour the wards, laboratories, and emergency wings. Everything gleamed like hope. Children waved at him. Patients blessed him, and doctors saluted him. Still, when the ceremony ended and the guests left, Ethan felt strangely hollow. Fame was loud. Peace was quiet, and he still hadn't found the quiet. Later that night, a charity gala was held at Eco Hotel in his honor. The hall glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Music floated softly through the air. Politicians, celebrities, and business leaders filled the tables, all wanting a picture with the man of the moment. Ethan smiled, shook hands, but his mind was elsewhere. He had never liked parties. They reminded him too much of the world his parents used to live in. Shiny on the outside, empty on the inside. Halfway through the evening, Victor leaned toward him. "Sir, the governor would like you to meet someone, a donor from the United States who's been funding similar projects." Ethan nodded, rising. "Let's go." As they walked across the hall, the crowd parted. The donor stood by the bar, a tall woman in a red gown, her back turned. When she turned around, Ethan froze. It was Clara. For a heartbeat, the music, the voices, the world disappeared. She smiled, a little shyly, a little sadly. "You didn't think you'd seen the last of me, did you?" Ethan's breath caught. "Clara, you've done well for yourself," she said softly. "When I heard about the foundation, I knew it had to be you." He laughed quietly. "I thought you went back to the States for good." "I did, but I always said one day I'd work with you again." She extended her hand. "I guess today is that day." He took her hand slowly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You kept your promise." They talked for hours that night, away from the crowd. Clara told him about her years abroad, her foundation for widows and children. Ethan told her about the challenges he faced, the scandals, the forgiveness, the peace he was still searching for. "You've saved the world," she said quietly, "but you still look like a man who hasn't saved himself." He looked away. "Maybe I don't know how." "Then let me remind you," she said gently. "You deserve joy too, Ethan, not just duty." Her words stayed with him long after the gala ended. The next morning, Clara visited the new hospital. Ethan gave her a tour, the pediatric wing, the maternity section, the research lab. Everywhere they went, patients greeted him warmly. Nurses smiled. Hope filled the air like perfume. At the rooftop garden overlooking the city, Clara stopped and turned to him. "You've turned pain into beauty, Ethan. This place feels alive." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes I still wake up wondering if I'm dreaming." "It's real," she said. "And so are you." For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside, not the fire of ambition, but the warmth of belonging. Clara wasn't just a friend from the past. She was a bridge between who he was and who he'd become. They sat there for a while, the wind tugging at their clothes, the city glowing beneath them. "Do you ever think about what life could have been if you hadn't been abandoned?" Clara asked quietly. He thought for a long moment. "If they hadn't left me, maybe I wouldn't have become this. Pain was my teacher." She nodded slowly. "But it doesn't have to be your teacher forever." That week, Ethan's story spread again, not because of scandal this time, but because of inspiration. News outlets across the world called him the billionaire who forgave. He didn't like the title, but he accepted it. It wasn't about him. It was about the message. Then one afternoon, while reviewing paperwork at his office, Victor rushed in. "Sir, there's an emergency. It's your parents." Ethan stood instantly. "What happened?" "They were in a car accident. They're at the hospital." His heart dropped. For a second, the world went silent. "Which hospital?" "Yours," Victor replied quietly. Ethan didn't wait. He ran out, jumped into his car, and sped through traffic. His chest burned. His hands shook on the steering wheel. When he arrived, nurses were waiting at the entrance. "Where are they?" he asked breathlessly. "This way, sir." He pushed through the doors, past corridors filled with the sound of machines and whispers. In one room lay his mother, unconscious but breathing. In another, his father, weak, bandaged, barely alive. Ethan stood at the doorway, trembling. Memories flooded him. The hospital, the rain, the abandonment. Only this time, the roles were reversed. The doctor approached. "Sir, your father's condition is critical. He's asking for you." Ethan entered slowly. His father opened his eyes, struggling to speak. "Ethan, you came." "I'm here, Dad." I knew you would." Tears rolled down the old man's face. "I don't deserve you." "Don't talk," Ethan said softly. "You'll be fine." His father shook his head weakly. "No, I won't. But I need you to know I'm proud of you. You became the man I couldn't be." Ethan gripped his hand tightly. "You're forgiven, Dad. Rest now." A faint smile touched his father's lips. "You turned our curse into blessing." His hand fell limp. The monitor flatlined. Ethan froze. The room filled with silence. His eyes blurred as tears spilled uncontrollably. His mother survived, but she was broken, both in heart and body. For days, she refused to eat, crying endlessly. Ethan stayed beside her, feeding her, comforting her. One night, she turned to him weakly. "He died at peace because of you." Ethan shook his head. "No, because of mercy." She touched his hand gently. "You're all I have left. I wasted years chasing pride. Promise me you won't do the same." "I promise." A tear slid down her cheek. "Then my soul can rest when it's time." He hugged her softly. "It's not time yet, Mom." But in his heart, he knew that every forgiveness came with a price, and this was the final one. Months later, life moved on. His father's burial was quiet, simple, and peaceful. Ethan didn't invite cameras or the press. He wanted it to be human, not public. After the ceremony, he stood beside the grave long after everyone had gone. "Goodbye, Dad," he whispered. "You broke me once, but you also made me strong. Rest in peace." The wind rustled through the trees as if answering him. When he returned to the car, Clara was waiting. She didn't say anything, just held his hand. That simple touch said everything words couldn't. Weeks passed, and Ethan returned to work, more focused than ever. The hospital thrived. His foundation grew beyond borders. He partnered with Clara's charity, creating the Hope and Healing Initiative, a program that provided free healthcare across Africa. Everywhere he went, people called him a savior, a miracle worker, a man sent by God. But when he stood alone at night, staring at the skyline, he whispered a truth only he knew. "I was just a boy abandoned at a hospital." And maybe that was what made him different. On the first anniversary of his father's death, Ethan visited the hospital chapel. The evening light poured through the stained glass, painting his face with colors. He knelt quietly, whispering, "Thank you, God, for turning pain into purpose. When he stepped outside, Clara was waiting with 2 tickets in her hand. You've built hospitals everywhere. Now it's time to build peace inside yourself. Let's travel, just you and me. He smiled softly. I don't know how to rest. Then I'll teach you, she said, smiling back. For the first time, he laughed. Not the polite laugh of a public man, but the full, genuine laughter of a soul finally healing. That night, as he stood on his balcony, the sea breeze brushing against his face, Ethan looked at the city that once watched him fall and rise again. Lights shimmered across the lagoon. Somewhere below, an ambulance siren wailed, another life being saved in the hospital he built. He closed his eyes and whispered, "From abandonment to abundance, what a journey." The wind answered softly, carrying the sound of peace. Ethan smiled. For the first time in years, the ache inside him felt light. The cycle was complete. The boy who was left to die had returned home, not to seek revenge, but to rewrite the meaning of love. The morning sun shone bright over Lagos, glinting off the polished glass walls of Marshall Medical City. It was a new day, one that should have begun in peace. But by noon, the world Ethan had built began to shake. Victor burst into his office, breathless and pale. "Sir, something's wrong." Ethan looked up from his desk, calm as usual. "What is it?" Victor hesitated, clutching a tablet. An investigative journalist from the Global Mirror just released a story, a scandal. They claim your foundation is laundering money through international accounts. Ethan froze. "That's impossible." "I know, sir," Victor said, "but they've published documents. Fake, probably, linking your hospital funds to offshore accounts. It's spreading fast." Ethan stood slowly, his heart thudding. "Call the legal team and send a message to the PR department. I'll address this myself." Within hours, the story had gone viral. News stations replayed headlines. "Billionaire humanitarian caught in corruption web. The saint has stains." Ethan's name, once spoken with reverence, now carried suspicion. By evening, protesters gathered outside the foundation gates. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Inside, the staff looked afraid. Victor's voice trembled. "Sir, should we close operations for now?" Ethan shook his head. "No, the patients come first. Let the world talk. We'll keep working." But even as he said the words, pain gripped his chest. He knew what this meant. Another test of everything he stood for. He retreated to his private office and called Clara. She answered instantly. "I've seen the news." "Ethan, what's happening?" "Someone's trying to destroy everything I built," he said quietly. She paused. "Then we'll fight it." "I don't know who's behind it yet," he murmured, "but I have a feeling it's connected to my father's old rivals, the ones he cheated years ago. They must be trying to finish what he started." Clara's voice was steady. "Then we find them. Together." Her words steadied him. He leaned back, eyes closed. "Every time I think the past is gone, it finds me again." "That's because you built something worth envying," she said softly. "But truth always wins, Ethan. You've walked through worse." That night, he met with his legal team. "We'll need to trace where these documents came from," the head lawyer said. "If we find the source, we can prove this is a setup." Victor added, "Sir, should I contact the journalist for a statement?" Ethan shook his head. "No, let them talk. I'll answer with facts." But inside he was torn. The same country that had celebrated him last week now mocked him. His face filled headlines again, only this time not as a hero. He went home late that night, sat alone in the dark, and whispered, "Lord, how many storms must I survive?" Days passed. Investigations deepened. The government froze some of his accounts pending review. Contracts were suspended. Business partners withdrew quietly. Clara stayed by his side. "Ethan, don't lose faith," she said one morning. "This will pass." He smiled weakly. "The last time I heard that, I was lying in a hospital bed with no one beside me. But maybe you're right." She touched his hand. "You're not alone this time." That gave him strength. He rose, determined to fight. 1 week later, he received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm and cold. "Mr. Marshall, I have information that can clear your name for a price." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that the documents against you were forged by someone close to your father's old associates. They want revenge for what he did to them. I can give you proof, but you'll have to pay $10 million. Ethan's jaw clenched. "If you have truth, you should speak it." The voice chuckled darkly. "In this world, truth has a price." The call ended. Ethan stood still for a long time. Then he called Victor. "Trace that number." "Yes, sir." Hours later, Victor returned with the report. The number was routed through a private firm in South Africa, one owned by Daniel Reed. Ethan's eyes widened. "Reed? My old boss." "Yes, sir. The same Mr. Reed who owned the mechanic shop where you once worked." Ethan sat down slowly. "He helped me once. Why would he do this?" Victor hesitated. "Maybe he didn't forgive you for leaving without notice after you won the scholarship." Ethan closed his eyes, the irony cutting deep. The world really is round. The people you meet on your way up are the same ones waiting on your way down. The next day, Ethan flew to South Africa, quietly with Clara and Victor. They tracked Reed's company to a luxury estate outside Johannesburg. When Reed saw him, his expression turned from surprise to guilt. "Ethan, you came." "I had to," Ethan said calmly. "Why are you doing this?" Reed sighed, avoiding his gaze. "Because you forgot me. You made millions and never looked back. I was drowning in debt while you were giving speeches on compassion." Ethan's voice softened. "I didn't forget you. I built this life because of people like you. You gave me a chance when no one else did." Reed laughed bitterly. "Then why didn't you repay me?" Ethan stepped forward. "What do you want, Reed? Money? Credit? Name it." Reed hesitated. "I wanted recognition. But now it's too late. The story's already out." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then fix it." Reed looked at him for a long moment. "You think forgiveness is easy, don't you? You forgave your parents, but not everyone is built like you." "Forgiveness isn't weakness," Ethan said quietly. "It's freedom." Reed turned away. "Go home, Ethan. Let the world decide who you are." Back in Nigeria, things worsened. Investors withdrew. Government audits intensified. The press hounded him daily. But instead of hiding, Ethan did something unexpected. He called for a live televised interview. When the cameras rolled, he sat calmly before millions of viewers and said, "I built my life on transparency, kindness, and faith. If I ever took what wasn't mine, let the world judge me. But I know who I am. I was once abandoned in a hospital with nothing. Everything I have came from hard work and mercy." His voice shook but didn't break. "This foundation isn't about money. It's about people. And if the world takes it away, I'll start again, even from dust." The interview went viral. The next morning, half the country praised him, half doubted him, but no one could deny his sincerity. 2 days later, Reed's assistant contacted Victor secretly. Mr. Reed collapsed after confessing everything to the authorities. He admitted forging the documents to destroy Ethan's reputation. When Victor told Ethan, he sat in silence for a long moment, then whispered, "May God forgive him." Clara looked at him, astonished. "You're not angry?" He smiled faintly. "I've spent my whole life forgiving people. It's the only language I know." With Reed's confession, the charges were dropped. The government unfroze his accounts. The media changed their tone overnight. Billionaire vindicated. False scandal exposed. Crowds returned to cheer again. But Ethan no longer cared for the noise. He stood before his staff and said quietly, "We don't celebrate other people's downfall, even if they wronged us. We just keep building." The room filled with applause. That night, Clara came to see him. "You've cleared your name again, but you look more tired than ever." He chuckled softly. "Maybe because peace always comes at a price." She walked closer. "You don't have to fight alone anymore. Let someone share your peace too." Ethan looked into her eyes. For years, she had been his anchor, his reminder of light. "You already do," he said quietly. She smiled. "Then promise me something." "What?" that you'll stop trying to save the world before you save yourself. He laughed softly. You sound like my conscience. Maybe I am. They stood together on the balcony, the city lights glowing beneath them. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to lean, not on faith, not on strength, but on love. Weeks later, he visited the old hospital again, the place where his story had begun. The staff there treated him like royalty, but he waved them off. He wanted silence. He walked through the corridor slowly, his footsteps echoing. In one ward, a young boy lay on a bed, crying softly. Ethan approached. What's wrong, son? The boy sniffled. My father left me here. He said he'll come back, but he won't. Ethan's heart clenched. He sat beside the boy and took his hand. Maybe he will, but even if he doesn't, you'll be fine. You're stronger than you think. The boy looked up at him. How do you know? Ethan smiled sadly. Because once I was you. As he stepped outside into the evening air, the city stretched before him. Vast, alive, forgiving. He whispered, every wound I became someone else's healing. Clara joined him, sliding her hand into his. So what's next? He smiled softly. Now I rest, and maybe I finally live. They walked away together, the sunset burning gold behind them. A man who had been abandoned, betrayed, and tested, yet still chose mercy over revenge. In the end, the greatest revenge he ever gave the world was kindness. The morning breeze drifted softly through the open window of Ethan's home, carrying the scent of fresh rain and earth. The world outside was awake, birds chirping, cars honking faintly, and the hum of the city that had both broken and crowned him. But inside, everything was calm. Ethan sat in his study, reading old letters spread across his desk, memories from a life that felt like someone else's. There was a letter Clara had written him when he was abroad, yellowed with time. The note Mr. Paul had once slipped into his pocket. Even the torn hospital discharge paper that bore the signature of his father. He traced his fingers over the faint ink and smiled faintly. From pain came purpose, he murmured, and from rejection came direction. Clara entered quietly, her voice soft. You're thinking again. He looked up, smiling. Thinking keeps me human. She came closer and leaned against the desk. It's been 2 years since the scandal ended, yet you still don't rest. I'm not restless, he said, just grateful. Grateful to have survived enough to still feel everything. She studied him, her eyes full of admiration. Sometimes I wonder, Ethan, do you ever regret forgiving so easily? He chuckled softly. Never. Forgiveness gave me power no revenge ever could. When I forgave, I won. Outside, the Marshall Medical City buzzed with life. Since the scandal ended, it had become one of the most respected hospitals in Africa. Each month, thousands of patients were treated for free. Nations invited Ethan to speak about leadership and compassion. Awards filled his shelves, but he rarely looked at them. He had learned that the true measure of success was peace of mind. Still, he had one unfinished chapter in his heart. His mother, after his father's death, she had lived quietly in the countryside, her health fading with time. Ethan visited often, bringing food, medicine, and nurses. Yet, she always told him, I don't need wealth, son. I just need you to forgive me every morning. And every time, he smiled and replied, I already did. But deep inside, he knew she carried guilt like a stone that no amount of comfort could lift. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Ethan received a call. It was one of the nurses. Sir, your mother isn't doing well. She's asking to see you. His heart tightened. I'm on my way. He drove through the quiet countryside roads, memories flooding him like old songs. The trees leaned softly in the evening wind, whispering the kind of silence that comes before goodbye. When he entered the small house, the scent of herbs and medicine filled the air. His mother lay on the bed, frail and thin but peaceful. She smiled weakly when she saw him. My son, my pride. Don't say that, Mom. You'll be fine. She shook her head gently. I've lived long enough to see you become everything I prayed for, and more. I can rest now. He sat beside her, holding her hand. Rest when you're ready, not before. Her fingers trembled as she touched his face. "You forgave us when you shouldn't have. You loved us when we didn't deserve it. I see your father in heaven every night in my dreams. He's proud. He says thank you." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "He's forgiven too." She smiled softly. "Promise me something, Ethan." "Anything. Keep loving, even when it hurts. The world needs men who heal, not men who hate." He nodded, tears streaming silently. "I promise." She closed her eyes. "Good. Then I can go peacefully." Her hand grew still in his. The room went silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock. Ethan held her hand until it grew cold, whispering, "You're forgiven, Mom. Always." He sat there for a long time, the sunset pouring golden light over her face, making her look like she was only sleeping. And though his heart broke again, it broke differently this time, gently, like something being set free. A week later, the funeral was held in her village. It was small and quiet, just as she had wanted. Clara stood beside him, silent, her hand in his. The townspeople wept as they watched the billionaire kneel in the red earth, covering his mother's coffin with sand. When the last handful fell, Ethan whispered, "The woman who gave me life gave me back my peace." After everyone left, he stayed behind. The sky above turned a deep shade of purple, and stars began to pierce the dusk. He spoke softly to the grave. "You both left me once, but I learned to live without bitterness. You taught me what not to be, and that was the greatest gift of all. Rest now. I'll carry the name Marshall with pride." He stood, brushed the dust from his hands, and turned toward the waiting car. Months passed. Ethan returned to Lagos with renewed purpose. The world still saw him as a symbol of forgiveness, but now he began to focus on something more personal: mentorship. He launched a new initiative called the Second Chance Project, aimed at training orphans and abandoned children in different skills. He visited schools, spoke at youth centers, and shared his story with tears and laughter. "Your background doesn't define your future," he told them one afternoon, standing before hundreds of students. "I was left to die, but look at me now. Don't curse your pain, use it. Pain is a hammer that shapes purpose." The children clapped and shouted his name, but one small boy ran up and hugged him tightly. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Ethan smiled, kneeling. "Don't be like me. Be better." Back at the hospital, Clara managed most of the operations now. She had become his partner in more ways than one. In purpose, in vision, and in quiet companionship. One evening, as the two of them walked through the hospital gardens, the scent of roses in the air, Clara looked at him with gentle eyes. "You've spent your whole life fixing others, Ethan. But who fixes you?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't need fixing anymore." "Everyone needs someone," she said softly. He stopped walking and turned to her. "And if that someone has been beside me all this while..." She blushed, looking down. "Then maybe it's time he said it." He took her hands in his voice trembling. "Clara, you've been my light in every dark room. You've seen me broken, angry, empty, and you stayed. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who I want beside me when it comes." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan," he smiled, "you taught me how to heal. Now let's build something together. Not a company, not a hospital, but a home." She nodded, her lips trembling into a smile. "Yes." And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt complete. The wedding was private, a quiet ceremony in the hospital chapel. Only staff, a few friends, and some of the children from his mentorship program attended. The air was filled with joy and laughter. When Ethan and Clara exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "I promise to love you in peace and in storms," he said. "And I promise to walk with you even when the road disappears," she replied. The applause that followed felt like thunder. Afterward, they stood outside watching the sunset together. Clara whispered, "So this is happiness?" Ethan smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "No, this is grace." Years rolled by. Ethan grew older, his hair streaked with gray, but his spirit never dimmed. The Marshall Medical City expanded across Africa, and his foundation became a legacy that outlived him. Every now and then, he returned to that same hospital bench where his story had begun, The bench outside where rain once fell on a boy the world had forgotten. He'd sit quietly, watching new patients walk in, nurses rushing by, and he'd smile to himself. Life is a circle, he would whisper. But forgiveness breaks the chain. On one such day, a journalist approached him for a documentary. "Sir," she asked, "what's the secret behind your peace?" He looked up, eyes gentle, voice steady. "Peace isn't found in power or money. It's found in letting go. The world hurt me, but I refuse to become like it." She smiled. "What would you tell people who feel abandoned by life?" He gazed at the sky. "I'd tell them, the story isn't over yet. Sometimes being left behind is just the beginning of being found." That night, he returned home and stood by the window with Clara beside him. The city lights shimmered, the wind hummed softly, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Ethan held her hand and whispered, "You know, I've realized something. Every time I forgave someone, I didn't lose, I won. Because forgiveness didn't make them right. It just made me free." Clara smiled. "Then you've lived well." He nodded. "No, I've lived blessed." As the final night of his life came years later, Ethan lay peacefully in his bed, surrounded by photos of all he had built. Children smiling, hospitals shining, families reunited. Clara sat beside him, holding his hand, tears rolling down her face. He whispered faintly, "Don't cry. This isn't an ending, it's a continuation." She smiled through her tears. "You're still teaching even now." He looked at her one last time. Tell them that the boy abandoned at the hospital found home in every heart he helped." And with a soft sigh, he closed his eyes. The next morning, the world mourned, but not with sorrow, with gratitude. Newspapers across continents carried his story. Headlines read, "From abandonment to immortality, the man who turned pain into mercy." Statues were built, schools were named, and hospitals expanded in his honor. But beyond all that, his greatest legacy lived in the hearts he touched. Because in the end, Ethan Marshall wasn't just a man who forgave. He was proof that love always wins, even when the world tries to break you. And somewhere in the heavens, as rain began to fall softly over the city, it sounded almost like applause.